Hey everyone, my name's Dom, welcome back to the channel. Today it's time for my review and preview video, where I take a look at the books that I read in February and a look ahead to what I've got in store for March. So first of all, February was both a good month and a bad month for me. I was really busy at work and also I was ill towards the end of the month. I'm still not quite over it, which is why I might sound a little bit breathless now and then, because it has been a bit difficult for me breathing recently. I am absolutely fine. I just had a bit of a heavy cold, and because I have asthma as well, it does affect me a bit more than it might normally do. So nothing to worry about, no COVID or anything like that. We do a lot of testing in my house because my wife works for the NHS and my daughter is at school, so we have to do a lot of lateral flow testing as part of our weekly life anyway at the moment, and it made it easy for me to kind of eliminate that as a possibility, which is always nice. At work I also started a new kind of role, I guess. It's a bit weird to think of it like that because I am essentially self-employed. I do freelance proofreading, but what's really good about that for me in terms of my reading is it's given me the opportunity to try out audiobooks again, and that's really been one of the highlights of February for me, as we'll see. So as far as the actual reading in February goes, I'll do the usual for this video and split it up into a look at the stats, and then a closer look at the individual books, and then obviously at the end a look ahead to what I'm going to be reading or hoping to read in March. Where I did listen to a couple of audiobooks in February, and for any month going forward where I include audiobooks, although it's not by dictionary definition reading, I'm still consuming those books, so I will be including those within the reading stats. So all told in February I read 5 books, and that was a total of 2,161 pages, and it gave me an average of 480 pages per book. Now something else that I am going to do with the stats in terms of the average page count is I will exclude novellas as a whole when I do the averages, because they really skew the stats and I don't think it gives kind of an accurate picture. The average rating though for February, for which I will include any novellas that I've read, was a flat 4.0. Year to date then, as we're still early on in the year, that gives me a total page count of 4,037, an average page count of 475, and an average rating of 3.89. So overall for the year, and also for February as a month in isolation, I feel like I've had a really good start to 2022. As far as the series goes, not a vast amount of movement on there this early in the year. I've started 4 new series over the course of the year, haven't finished any yet, haven't DNF'd any yet. That gives me 8 series that I consider myself to be up to date with. I've read all of the books that have so far been published, and 17 series in total that I consider myself in the middle of, whether there are more books released that I haven't read yet, or I'm just waiting for the next book to be released so I can continue with or finish that series. In terms of a day since the last 5-star read, this one's a little bit strange because I'm looking back to February, so I'm going to call it 11 days as of the date that this video is being filmed. However, because I am a bit late in filming this because I was ill, I have continued my reading obviously, and some of the books that I've read since February finished may just have changed that number if I was including them here. So what books did I read in February then? First of them was part of a buddy read with my friend Nina. We are reading the Tide Child trilogy by R.J. Barker, and the first book that we read in February was The Bone Ships. So this one I won't say too much about, because if you are interested in hearing a bit about what the book's about and also my thoughts on the book, you can do so by watching my dedicated review, which will be up in the top corner there. This was an enjoyable book. It was a very strange book as well, though. It took me quite a while to get into it, and as a result it took me a lot longer to read than I was anticipating. I'd kind of earmarked a week for this book within the kind of the realms of the buddy read, because we were also going to be reading another book in the second week of February as well. So I'd set myself a week for this, but it took me closer to 10 days, maybe a little bit more than that, to actually get through this, because I kind of really struggled to get up to a good pace. I was finding that I wasn't really reading a lot of the book when I was sitting down to reading. I was just doing kind of 10 or 15 pages sometimes, and then that was all I was managing. So it wasn't a great start to the month in that respect, but overall when I did get to the end of it, I quite enjoyed this book. It was very different. There was a lot of interesting world building, some really cool characters in there as well. So I'm looking forward to continuing this series as we continue in our buddy read of it. I gave The Bone Ships 4 stars out of 5 because overall it was quite enjoyable once I got past that kind of initial hurdle that I was having, and I'm definitely interested to see where the series goes, especially because I've heard so many good things about The Bone Ships Wake, which is the final book in this trilogy. So then, whilst I was finishing off The Bone Ships, I had a message on Instagram from an author. This one was a title called The Beast Hunters by Krista Linda. Now, I was offered either an ebook or an audiobook for The Beast Hunters, and this one I thought I'm going to try the audio and I'll treat it as a test to kind of revisit audiobooks and see if I can get into them, see if I can actually read books through that different medium. And I listened to this one over the space of a day or two because it was quite short whilst I was doing some work, and I actually really quite enjoyed it. It's a very different kind of book to the ones that I would normally read. It's about a young girl whose parents are killed basically by a monster, and she is about to be killed by the same monster, but she is rescued by two beast hunters who've been kind of tracking this beast, and they come to her rescue just in time. Because her world has pretty much literally been ripped apart around her, she has no one left, she has nowhere to go, she doesn't want to or she can't stay at home because it's been completely destroyed by this beast. So she goes with these two beast hunters as they continue their journey around the land, looking for jobs basically where they will hunt and kill more monsters. So over the course of the journey, our characters get to know each other a little bit, but we also get to know lots about the actual monsters of this world. It's almost a bit like a kind of Fantastic Beasts, where we're learning about individual monsters, not only as we see them, but also as our character is kind of reading a book, essentially, a kind of a guidebook to the monsters of this world. So we will hear about different monsters and what they look like and what their characteristics are, what kind of traits they have, and how you can recognise the kind of the signs of these monsters passing. And part of the reason that that's useful is not only as kind of a training montage without it being in a school setting, but also because there's a bit of mystery to this story as well, as we're trying to find out what's happening with a certain part of the storyline, what's responsible, what beast could it be that is causing these problems. So it was really interesting. I thought it was well done, it was quite well written, very fast paced, and also the storyline itself, the characters, the world, I was quite at home with. I thought it really pulled together quite well. So this one I gave a 3.5. There were a few things that I wasn't as fond of, but you know, it was practically a novella. It was a very short and a quick read, and those things weren't big enough to really spoil my enjoyment of it or anything along those lines. So I definitely enjoyed this one, both for the book itself and also for the kind of reintroduction that it gave me to listening to books on audio. So then in terms of the physical reading, again, once I'd finished with The Bone Ships, I moved straight into the second buddy read that I was having with Nina, which was for Cold from the North by D.W. Ross, book 1 in the Onyxborn Chronicles. This is a gorgeous book that the author sent me, so thank you very much, DW, for this. It is absolutely gorgeous to look at. I really do like this, and I love that we've got the naked hardback under there with the golden version of Sultana, the axe, which is featured in this particular story. But I really liked this one. It was a really good setting. It's called Cold from the North, and you really do get that in the book itself, the opening of the book especially, where we're set in these really cold northern lands. It's really atmospheric. He's done a really good job at portraying that. The story itself is again one that I really enjoyed. It's got some great characters, some great introduction to magic. I really like where this is going, and I'm looking forward to reading book 2 in April. I think we're going to do to get through this series, and then book 3 is scheduled for release. I think it's early to mid-June as well. So over the next few months I'll be able to finish this trilogy, and I'm really looking forward to continuing with it, to seeing where our characters go, where the story takes us, and to seeing if it gets better than this, because I really enjoyed this as an opening book. Again, I've done a dedicated review for this, which you can see in the card up in the top corner. go check it out if you haven't already. I definitely recommend Cold from the North for any fan of self-pub fantasy or any fan of fantasy in itself, because it's just a really good overall story. This is another one that I gave 4 stars to because I really had a good time reading this, and I can't wait to see if book 2 can build on that and get itself a higher score as a result. Next up, I continued on my second kind of audiobook journey, and the first kind of novel that I did in this second run through, the second trial of audiobooks, was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is one which has been on my radar for a while. I've got so many friends who've read it and absolutely love it, and it was one that I definitely wanted to read because although it was going to be a different story, they're not linked, it's not a sequel or anything like that, I really enjoyed The Martian. I've not read it, but I really enjoyed the movie. I love the kind of the narrative style of it and the way that everything worked out and how kind of believable it was, how the science was really well done and relatable. With Project Hail Mary, it was exactly the same. I loved how all of the science kind of pulled together and our character was working things through, and you could really kind of understand and follow, even though I'm not a scientist and even though almost all of the science part was actually over my head. That didn't matter because I could really believe it because it was so accessible and it made it a really good book. The overall story and the characters I really liked, and the audio as well. The audiobook itself was really high quality. So I really did like this one, and I gave Project Hail Mary 5 stars, making it my favourite book of the month. And then I wrapped up February with another self-pub book that was sent to me very kindly by the author. This is A Touch of Light by Thiago Abdallah, book 1 in the Ashes of Averin series. Again, I'm not going to talk too much about the kind of the individual elements of the story because I will have a dedicated review for this one coming out soon as well. I was really looking forward to this one. It sounded really interesting with kind of almost a mix between life and death. It's not quite that way, but you've got a couple of different ways of looking at death. Death on the one hand for kind of part of this world is something which is almost looked down upon. Life is cherished, life is pretty much worshipped, and the unworthy who die are burned and they're not to be mourned basically. Their name is literally never to be mentioned again. And then you've got other parts of the world where life and death form part of that circle of life. Death is something which is natural and it's kind of to be cherished, and there's part of the kind of belief system in these clan lands where the world can only really continue if people are dying and if they're being returned to the earth at the end of their life cycle. And it's quite interesting to see how those two different viewpoints on life kind of drive the story in different ways for our characters in those two different areas. The book itself I did enjoy the story of. Like with the Bone Ships, there were some elements of this that really kind of bogged me down a little bit and made it take longer for me to read than I was hoping and expecting that it would do. I definitely enjoyed the second portion of the book a lot more than I enjoyed the first portion of the book. Once more, I'll have a dedicated review for this one coming out soon, so keep your eye out for that and you can hear my specific thoughts on various aspects. But I gave this one 3.5 stars out of 5. I liked it, I enjoyed it, I'll recommend it, and I will be looking at this second book when it comes out. But I wanted a bit more. I wish I liked it a bit more than I did. Okay, and on to my March reading then, and this one's a little bit strange because I normally will pick out a couple of books that I'm really intending to read and then leave the rest of it to whatever takes my fancy at the time because I am a mood reader. This month I have stacked myself with reads a little bit, so I might not really have that much room for manoeuvre because some of these are review copies that I want to, or in some cases have to really, read and review within a time frame. So it does kind of restrict my reading month a little bit. The first book though that I'm going to talk about is The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding. This is one that I've been looking forward to reading for quite a while. I've had on my shelf behind me there. This one, again, it's a bit of a strange one for me to talk about here in a kind of a TBR type scenario, looking ahead to what I'm going to be reading, because I have already by this point actually finished reading this. So I'm not going to talk about my thoughts on the book because obviously that's going to be for next time, but this was continuing my audiobook journey. I started it in February and I finished it a few days into March. This has been described as a bit of a modern Lord of the Rings, not in terms of the story or the characters, the settings, anything along those lines, but more just the kind of feel of it, where you've got a group which forms, which is a bit like the Fellowship, if you want to make that comparison. They're going on a quest, there's a bit of infiltration of enemy territory and things like that. So it's not a retelling, it's not a rip-off of Lord of the Rings or anything along those. It's just got kind of a Lord of the Rings type Fellowship vibe to it. But this is more modern as well. It's in a modern style, and that's one of my key kind of drawbacks of Lord of the Rings. The writing style for me is really difficult to get into and enjoy. So I'll say that I'm looking forward to this one because I definitely have been, but I know in advance that I'm going to enjoy it because, well, I already have enjoyed it. Then the second one, which is a bit weird because again, I've already finished it by the time this video goes out. I had plans to read The Iron Crown by L.L. McRae as part of my February reading, but when I received an arc of A Touch of Light, because of the time frame involved for release date, I wanted to prioritise that one, and then I didn't actually get around to The Iron Crown. Because I was starting a fresh month though, I decided actually I am going to read first of all the prequel novella The Citrine Key, so I read that as my first book in March. Again, like The Ember Blade, I've finished it. I'm not going to talk about it in this video in terms of what I thought of it because that'll be for the next one, but it's exactly what I want from a novella in terms of introducing me to the author's writing style, but also introducing me to the world that the main story is going to be set in. So I'll include it as kind of a TBR book for March because I am going to / have read it in March, but we'll find out more about The Citrine Key in my next wrap-up video. Obviously though, the next one up is going to be The Iron Crown, and this time I definitely will get round to it because by the time this video goes out I'll already be a few chapters in, because I have already started this last night as of the time of filming. So I've been looking forward to this one again for quite a while, and I'm really interested to see where we go with this. I know that we open up with a character called Fen who kind of wakes up in the middle of the forest with pretty much total amnesia. He doesn't even know, well, he knows his name, but he doesn't know anything else pretty much. So we're going to be going on a bit of a journey of exploration to find out who Fen is, what's happened to him, what's he going to be doing going forward. One of the things that I really like about this book from my knowledge of The Citrine Key, and one of the things that I really am looking forward to finding out more, is the series itself is called The Dragon Spirits, and basically all dragons in this world are spirits. So rather than having physical corporeal dragons, they are these kind of mythical beasts, and they can form in the air. They don't necessarily have solid form all the time, but they can just form in the air and appear in front of you. And it's a really interesting concept. I want to delve more into it because it's not something that in the scope of the novella you get the opportunity to see a vast amount of. It's a bit like a teaser, but it teases very well. So I'm really looking forward to continuing my journey with Lauren's writing and continuing to see what happens to Fen and see how the events of The Citrine Key are kind of intertwined with this story, if they are at all. And I'll be reporting back with hopefully a dedicated review, and obviously you'll hear more about my thoughts in my next wrap-up video as well. As I mentioned earlier on, I'm also continuing this month with my Tide Child trilogy kind of journey. So in March we are going to be reading book 2, which is The Call of the Bone Ships. As I said, I enjoyed the opening book in this series. I was a bit kind of confused. It just took me a bit of getting into, but once I was past that, I was able to really enjoy it. So I'm hoping that's going to continue with book 2 in the series, because I already know what the world is like, and I've already got my head around a lot of the kind of weird terminology and things like that. So I'm looking forward to being able to pick this one up and just run with it and really enjoy it. So I'm going to be reading Call of the Bone Ships, and then the following month in April we're looking at rounding out the series with The Bone Ships Wake. The rest of the books that I've got planned for March though are all review copies, which is where kind of the planning is taken a little bit out of my hands. Only one of these is an advance review copy. The other ones have actually been released, but as review copies I still treat them with that priority because I want to get these read and reviewed for the authors in as quick a timescale as possible, really. So the first of these is The Empress of Beasts and Mist by Ginevra Mancinelli. This is an author who featured with Thiago Abdallah on my indie showcase that I released a couple of weeks ago, and she's got a series called A Hello of Talons and Tears, which I'm really looking forward to getting into, and I do have a copy of the first two books of that series on my Kindle, but they are in PDF format, and that doesn't work quite as well as the Mobi format for converting or for being able to be read on the Kindle. So I thought I would start with this as a prequel to the main series, because if I enjoy this, if I really get on with the writing style and I'm really into the story, what I might do is just buy those books rather than reading the converted PDFs on my Kindle. This one though is, as I say, it's a prequel to that trilogy. We're looking at kind of House Wars, which is where some of the Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire comparisons have come in for this series. And if I'm not mistaken, we're following kind of one of the characters who features within the main series. So it's maybe got a bit of origin story to it, but I'm looking forward to this one, going into it quite blind, which is why I'm not really telling you what this story is about, but I'm looking forward to finding that out for myself as I'm reading it. Now, another review copy that I've received from the author is The Fire of the Forebears by L.A. Book. This book's just been released. I think it was 22nd of February maybe that this one came out, but I featured this one on my book cover sort of tier list video recently. I think I saw it on NetGalley and I really liked the cover and wanted to include it. So this one looks like we've got two main characters, the daughter of a deserter and the son of a king, and it sounds like they're thrown against each other in a fight to either fulfill or destroy their family's legacy. So it's quite interesting as an overall starting point without going too much in depth there. There are apparently some twisted monsters and some people wielding elemental magic who are roaming the world, but you've got some people who don't believe the stories and you've got some people who don't want to believe the stories. So I'm interested to see how that plays out and what part of the overall story it has, what impact it has on these two characters as they go about this battle to find, I would imagine, who ultimately is a hero and who is a villain. And paraphrasing the synopsis itself, I guess, are heroes and villains what they seem to be? So it looks like it's going to be an interesting one. As with a couple of the books that I'm planning for March, it is quite a hefty one. It's a good 600 and something pages, I think, this one. So I've got quite a lot of reading to look forward to, and I'm hoping that it's going to be a good time. I do also then have another advanced review copy on my Kindle, which I did have in my notes but somehow completely overlooked and didn't talk about. So I've just had to return to my filming location, which is when I also realised that I've filmed this entire video with my mic not plugged in, so that's just great. So I do apologise for the sound issues. When I'm not very well, that was already probably affected enough as it was. Either way though, as I say, there's another one which I had initially missed out, which is The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. This is book 2 in the Bloodsworn series. I did enjoy Shadow of Gods. It wasn't one of my favourite books of 2021. I did enjoy it, but just not as much as I wanted to. I thought there was a bit too much scene setting going on, and it took a while for me to get into the story. I think of our 3 POV characters, one of them, the story didn't get going until about a third of the way through the book, and a second one didn't get going until 50% of the way through the book. With Hunger of the Gods out, I'm expecting a much better time because, of course, we already know the storylines of these characters, so we know what's going on, we know where they've been, we know who they are, and it's always kind of a way for me with an opening book. It might sometimes take a bit of time to get going because you've got to learn about the world and the characters and the story, whereas a second book doesn't have that issue. So I'm really looking forward to this one. I can't wait to get started on it and to see where it goes. So that's it for February anyway, and my look ahead to March. Thank you very much for being with me today. Do apologise if I'm not my normal self. As I say, it's been quite a bit of a struggle breathing and talking at the same time, which is not really ideal, but hopefully, as I say at the top of the video, I'm past the worst of it now anyway, so we'll be back to normal service resuming soon. As usual, do all the YouTube stuff with liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Check out all the links to my social media and my support the channel pages in the description box below. Let me know in the comments as well how your February went and what you're looking forward to in March. I hope you had a good month reading and you've got another one coming up for you. I'll hopefully see you in another video soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.